Jayco Sportster pop-up camper. I recently replaced my hand crank winch here with my custom handle. I replaced this with a Harbor Freight 12, or I'm sorry, it's not a 12 volt necessarily in particular, but it's just a Harbor Freight winch. It was 60 bucks. But I hooked it up to my battery in there, and I'll kind of give you a quick rundown of the things you would kind of want to know if you're going to do this project. And even if you aren't going to do this project, I can give you some helpful insight on these cranks here, things you might need to know about it if you have one of these, and also some helpful insight on just the Jayco Sportster in general. So let's get into it. All right, so here's the inside of my camper. We're going to kind of start here at the batteries. As you can see, got a nice battery there, nice fuse block setup. I can disconnect power to my camper with just a flip of a resettable breaker right there, which is pretty nice. I definitely suggest doing that if you haven't, but we can save this for another video. But just to show you, we have full battery. I have a battery tender. The cord for that pops out the side. We can show you that later. But ultimately, this video is to kind of show you the pros and cons. I've got a lot of different comments about the winch setup. Some of you guys have some really good things to say. Some of you are a little confused, wanting to know different types of things. So you can see I'm not losing any space in the camper drawer here. I have the full drawer. I did have to notch out a section of it, but I can still open and close this. Oops, there we go. Perfectly fine. So I'm not losing any space. As you can see inside my cabinets, I have plenty of space inside there. Now, if you own a Jayco Sportster, I definitely encourage you guys to honestly take all this out. I want you to literally pop your camper up one day and just take all this apart, okay? If you have the tools, just take everything apart and redo it. I promise you, however you redo it will be better than the way that you found it, okay? So this piece right here is a vanity cover for the actuating cables to your linear lifting rods on your Jayco Sportster. I'm gonna pause the video. I'm gonna remove all of this stuff. I'll take the vanity cover out, and I'll also remove my cooler and this plate here so you can see where the cables go. All right, talking about the cooler really quick. Some of you, this is also a really good option if you don't want to get a 12 volt fridge that uses a lot of power. I just have it bungee corded in, right? You can still get in there. I have a additional rubber kind of tapered grommet down in there to prevent any leaks. And yeah, this works out really good. I had to notch out this for the handles, but it slides right in and out. And underneath this, I can still get access. So let me stop bantering and we'll get into it. So I'm almost there. Before I take the vanity cover off, I just wanted to give you a better look at it. This is something I made. You know, I just took my skill saw and some extra plywood I had laying around, and I just cut the dimensions I wanted and used some L brackets. And this is secured here just to keep the cables for the lifting system safe from any of my goods that I have up here while traveling. Also, I will note my my sink is disconnected from the winter right now, so ignore the unfinished product you see in my plumbing. All right, so let me put a pause and I'll remove this vanity. I'll take my drawer out and then we can get a better look here what's going on. Okay, so we're down to the nitty-gritty. All right, before we go there, I'm gonna run it back over here. That's the vanity cover. You can see it's pretty simple. It's nothing complicated. But what's important is when that vanity cover is installed, it's only held in with, I believe, 5 or 6 screws here. There's 5 screws. And I can take this out. So as long as I just take all my stuff out of here, I can get access to this. I can remove it. And I can find out what's going on with my winch system at any time when I'm on the road. So, because this is really what's going to tell you why your, roof isn't lifting up or down, is right here. So we'll come back to this in a second. If you follow the cables back, you'll see they go through here. I just have this. It quickly slots in. Whoops. It's only quick when I can do it two-handed, I think. There we go. So you can see this just sits here. My cooler goes on top, but I can still just take this out just like that. And again, I have even further access to check on my routing of my cables. I can check on the routing of have to turn my flashlight on. Oh, I guess I can't. So back here, it's really hard to see, but there's some cables right there for your linear actuators. So just a little bit more insight on how you can maybe make your Jayco easier to work on the day-to-day, so you're not scared to do it yourself. So, I just used a skill saw. I was careful with my measurements, and this fits in there perfectly. So let's come back over to this. Okay, so before we continue on, no matter what's on this end, whether you have an electric winch or you're using the original hand crank winch, I want to talk about this connection point, because you're having an issue with your Jayco lift system. This might be where you want to start, and that's why I think the vanity cover is important, because again, you can access this fairly easily. And what it is it's just a square plate here, and it's basically like the number 5, or I'm sorry, it's basically like a 5 on a dice. So you got 5 holes here. The center one has your winch cable going through it. And you're gonna have to just kind of bear with me. This is not, I'm not satisfied with this connection here. I'm gonna find a more harmonious connection that works. But whenever this is pulled tight, the winch plate unfortunately is kind of cocked at a 45 because of the way this is. But I will find a way to get this perpendicular and a more harmonious connection here. If you have any ideas, please drop it in the comments. But let's carry on for now. You'll see each corner I have a clip attaching from each corner to the cable that actuates each linear lifter. Okay, so basically, if I can just get this to hold still, you can quickly unscrew this. If you needed to adjust something, I can just back this up. You see? Right? I can open up that gap, I can take it off this plate, I can mess with something, whatever I need to do. So if you're having an issue with the roof, just make sure that all this looks good. If your 4 corners aren't connected to this plate, then your lift system is not going to function properly. When I first bought this camper, the previous owner said the roof, one of the corners was broken, and the first thing I did was rip apart this whole area. Gave me the confidence in knowing what I was looking at, and I identified that this wasn't hooked up properly. One of these corners was completely detached. And yeah, we'll talk about that later. But anyway, let's move on to the 12 volt, or I'm sorry, the electric portion of this video. So if you look at over here, we have the winch. The cable right here, the way this works is once the winch is drawing the cable in, it basically pulls on this plate right here, pulls tight, pulls all these cables tight, and it actually lifts each corner up. And I will post a like a picture at the end of what the lift looks like, the diagram of the actual linear lift. But we'll go ahead and lift this thing up, and then we'll talk about it. So we need to pull in on the cable. So basically we're gonna use this button right here. Oh, ignore that. So I'm gonna stop it right there. So one important thing is whenever you're done using the lift, you come back over here and you just turn the power off to it. So now, if this button was in the drawer and it accidentally gets hit, nothing can happen, right? So that's an important safety feature that we're going to talk about. Okay, so here's all the cables being pulled back. You can see we're almost all the way back with the winch, and I would say I'm probably 95% raised up. I always like to leave that extra 5 to 8% slack in the roof to avoid obviously pulling it too tight. Now I'm gonna devise some sort of extra preventative measure, but really it's just going to be up to your brain cells most of the time to avoid accidents happening. Here is a better look at our wiring coming from the winch, the red and black wire. We're coming right into a inline resettable 50 amp breaker, so I can push this lever in and provide power to the camper, or I'm sorry, provide power to the winch independently from the camper, and then I can press this red button and disconnect it completely to avoid accidental, button pressing and activation of the roof. Now I want to get to the really nitty-gritty of this project. This is completely custom. This is a Harbor Freight winch. It was about 60 bucks. The plate, this very top plate right here that my finger's on, this was about $5 from Harbor Freight, that top plate. And I had these C-channel already laying around in my garage that happened to just be the perfect harmonious height. I was able to drill everything out, make it work for these brackets. Now, one thing I want to point out is whenever I drill holes into this, there's about 4 or 5 of these bolt holes out of the 6 are, oh, I guess look at that, I forgot a lock washer. We'll have to identify where that, well, I'll get that out with the magnet later. But anyway, there's about 4 or 5 holes that are drilled into steel beneath. And I'll kind of give you a better look at that from the outside. So this connection point from here to the camper is very solid, and I would argue 90% more solid than it was with the hand crank winch. Here are my bottom 6 bolts. You can see 2 of them are not into steel, but 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are into this steel reinforced welded section across the entire camper from the previous owner. This is where I charge the batteries. And then right here, there is a clutch for the camper. If I pull that red knob out, I could theoretically free spin this. If in emergency, I can't rely on the winch to close the camper. So it's kind of a better look. Some of the things you might need to consider if you're going to tackle this project on your own. But yeah, I would say, you know, for me, I was competent drilling and tapping in down here, knowing that I had the confidence of that metal frame. It might not be the same for you. But either way, I definitely recommend doing this and having access to your cables, along with making your own custom vanity plate. So we'll go outside, we'll look at the old Jayco winch, we'll talk about that just a little bit, some of the issues I had with it when I first got it, and at the end of this video I will have like I'll try to make a little couple photos I'll share of my camper when I first got it. You know, it looks a lot different than it does now, and kind of give you guys some inspiration of what you can do with yours. Okay, so we're in the garage. You can see we got the old crank right here. This handle I had to have welded on. Basically, you can see right here it tapers to a larger size. This larger size didn't quite stick through the hole on the camper. So when I first got this, it was like, you know, I basically only had that much cranking distance, and it wasn't very, the geometry wasn't right. So I had to have this custom made, covered it in bed liner. But anyway, that definitely helped with my scenario. So if you're keeping your winch in there, kind of making something with a little bit more torque, a little bit longer length, definitely makes it easier to crank that handle. You can see the cable here is all frayed. It's all beat to hell. It's really sharp. It hurts to hold. So even though if you're not going to upgrade to an electric winch, it might be helpful to take yours out and replace all of these screws here. Because these were all self-tapping screws that went into the bottom of the wood, and they were maybe an inch long, so maybe you could bolt this all the way through. These bolts were completely missing when I got mine, and every time I'd crank this, you would physically see this thing rock back and forth, and that's why you get a lot of slop in these Jayco cranks. So reinforcing your bolts will definitely help with keeping this thing solid. And it looks like this is pretty easy to replace the cable on this, so maybe I'll do a separate video where I refresh this and I'll keep it as a backup, and maybe we'll make some reinforcements down here, maybe weld on some bigger channel. We'll see. So just a couple last thoughts to leave you with on this particular video for this subject. That plate with we'll call it the 5 dice plate here, it had these what do you call these? These kind of eye-loop bolts. I can't remember the actual name of them right now, but it had these eye-loop bolts on each of the 4 corners, and you can see that some of them are welded, but like this one is open, and that was an issue, and it bent one of them, and one of the attachment points came off when I first got this camper, and that's why that corner didn't work. So really, looking at that plate and identifying your connection points and finding something that works a little bit more reliable, like these locking carabiner style clips, that worked out well for me. Like I said, you can see under tension now, You know, I definitely need something that's a little bit more harmonious with this cable loop end, so this will be more perpendicular, but nonetheless, this is still working just fine. And you can see back here where the cooler sits, you can see the cables running back to the rest of the camper. So I might need to switch two of these around just to make them a little more harmonious as well. But yeah, just things to look out for on your Jayco. Okay, so just a few more preventative measures. You can obviously clearly mark your remote there, but one other thing I thought of is you can remove this drawer here at any time while you're camping, and you can look down the gun barrel of this thing. I made a little sight mark right here, and when we look down this, we can try to align the center of our area, kind of in our back line over here, and anything past this orange is, you know, pretty much death. So I'm not an artist or anything, but you know, that kind of gets you to the point to where you just have to use your brain cells to avoid accidentally over cranking this thing. And you can also reach your hand through and check for tension. You know, we want decent tension, but we don't want it super tight. You know, I like to leave a little bit of slack in there to where it's not at its maximum. I also want to note that I don't like to run the bungee cords all the time. I just did that for the purpose of me not having to run around on video and make sure my canvas didn't get pinched. But yeah,